Sweet.
Well, welcome everybody. Eric Lofholm here, and I am thrilled to introduce JP Morgan. And this is a training he's going to be sharing with all of us about what he has learned about the document, ideas that he has that can help all of us. And JP has spent over 100 hours with Steve Hardison. Some of you watched that YouTube video that he did. And he's just a brilliant trainer. And I love learning from JP. And so JP, with that, I'm going to take me off a spotlight. I'm going to get out my pen and take notes right along with everybody else and turn that over to you.
Awesome. Let's dive in. Thanks, Eric. Yeah. I spent over 100 hours with Steve, but I've spent thousands of hours with my document, we could say, just in the fact that I do it every day, save the days that I don't. Those are aberrations. It's okay. I don't have any judgment about that, but almost every single day with consistency, I'm in there in the morning, sometimes in the evening, different points throughout the day. And so I'm the ultimate student of the document, let's just say, for today. That's my relationship to it. And I come to here to share from that relationship to it, or like being a student of it is what makes it fun. And here's something I said to somebody recently who had a question about one of the pieces in our course. Actually, Joan Claire, who I hope is here because she was going to share a few words later. But she was asking me about one thing in particular. Is it this way or is it that way? And I shared my perspective on it, but I said, ultimately, the way to do it is the way that works best for you. And so everything that I share here today, I would love you to listen to as something to try on, as a possibility that points towards an ability for you to create your being. And if that doesn't work, don't think, oh, I'm doing it wrong. And don't think, oh, I need to go somewhere completely different and try a completely different approach to this thing called life. There's somewhere in the middle called I'm just going to explore. I'm going to try this a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right of center, tweak this a little bit, bring my spin on it a little bit. For me, categorically across all personal development, it's important to hold every tool that I use as a tool and not make it my master and turn it into something I'm judging myself as to whether I'm doing it right or wrong. It is the meta relationship, the relationship in the sense to the work that I'm doing, me staying in that role of I'm the one who's deciding how good I am at this. I'm the one who's deciding if I'm doing it right or wrong. That keeps you in a place of power and relationship to the work. Does that make sense? Can I get anybody nodding? Yeah, we got some thumbs and nods. Good. That's an important caveat for me. So I'm going to take you on a journey in about 30 minutes or so through what is essentially what I've been teaching for years now, which is an evolution of what I learned from Steve and my experience prior, but very much brought into way more depth and power through my work with Steve. And then I've added on in pieces throughout the years since then. But it is essentially the process that you go through, that one can go through to, in short form, identify the ideas that create who they are being, right? To liberate themselves from those ideas, especially if they're limiting ones, and to come into contact with a different idea, a related but different idea that has a deeper truth to it. That's something that's both created and pre-existing in a moment, to come into contact with that in a way where you can hold it as a concept in language. And then to take that, to document that statement, that declaration, such that you can be with that over time, to cultivate, to activate in a moment, but also cultivate over time a new habit of being that thing that's more true for you. And so we have an 8-week course that we sell with the Being Movement that a number of people here have gone through. Some of those we'll share later. That goes deep into all of those pieces, hours and hours of training, practices, exercises, distinctions. If you really want to dive deep into that, we'll offer that later. But what I'm going to do today in this 30 minutes or so is I'm going to go through all the modules in the course, and I'm going to give you the key insights and key distinctions from every one. So you don't have to wonder what's the best stuff that's in the course. I'm actually just going to give it to you, the most important points. Sure, if you did the course, you'd go deeper into it, become more understanding and embodied, but at least you're going to know what the real nuggets are. I'm not going to save the best thing for the course. I'm just going to give it to you guys today. So when I look down, by the way, I'm looking down at the course. So I'll share my screen at the end so you can see it, but like, I'm just going to use this as my outline for the talk. Okay. The first thing that's important for me to get across is why I relate to the creation of being as so fundamental, as primary. In fact, I don't have my coffee mug with me, but on my coffee mug, it says being is primary. Just a good reminder. I have my coffee every morning and, oh yeah, being is primary. It's the first words out of my mouth every day. The first declaration I speak is I am creation, creating, and my being is primary. It's the most important thing for me. Why? Because for me, the experience that I have in life comes from the environment that I'm in and the results that I get, all the things that are in my world, the relationship with my wife and kids and with people, the business that unfolds, the place that I live, the experience that I have when I go to the store and I bump into somebody and just start talking to them. All of these things are experiences that make up my life. And those are results that come from actions that I take. Steve has a really simple model. Results come from actions, right? Actions come from who we're being. And so if our actions come from our being and our results come from our actions and our results create our life, then the highest point of leverage for the creation of our life is the creation of our being. So we are going to be whether we mean it or not. We are being in the world. Sometimes I'm being an asshole. Sometimes I'm being a really nice person. Sometimes I'm being forgiving. Sometimes I'm being that I'm holding a grudge, right? And all these different ways of being create all different actions, behaviors, and results, and they create different lives moment by moment. So to take a conscious and loving role in the activation and cultivation of being is saying, I'm going to bring my best game to the highest point of leverage in the creation of my life. And the more attention I bring to that, the better my life gets. I've seen that time and time again, and I've seen it now with hundreds of our clients as well. So that's why, of course, the document is important. We talked about that last week, but just at a even wider level, that's why the creation of being is so important to me, because it gives me, again, I said the highest leverage point. It's the place where I can have the most impact on my life. And I think, you know, if everybody's here, you already get that to some degree. Otherwise, you wouldn't be kind of interested in the book of being, right? And the being movement. So I know you get that on some degree, but I think that getting that is not binary, but it's a continuum, because I continue to get it more and more deeply. So I can't weigh enough on the point. And if I can share a distinction or a metaphor that has you see even more deeply how even more true, how true that is on even a deeper level, and bring more life to that, then I'm happy to do that. Okay. So the first thing we need to do before we create a declaration of who we are is to realize what the declaration of who we are that already is, because we already have an idea of who we are. We have ideas about what the world is. We need to realize who we are being already before we can be something else. This is why I believe the psychological research that was done in the UK at university on affirmations showed that this was in the book by Professor Richard Wiseman. He's a psychology researcher in the UK. And the research showed that people who used affirmations ended up not feeling better by the end, but feeling worse. So if you give somebody, hey, just say to yourself, I'm beautiful. If you're feeling ugly, just say, I'm beautiful, and look in the mirror and say it every day. And they measured how good this person felt about themselves at the beginning and at the end of this period of time. And they felt worse, more ugly by speaking the affirmation. And the reason I believe that is from my own experience of speaking declarations that are off the shelf, because that would be a good idea, distinct from the process that I'm going to show you today. What happens is, and we touched on this last week when I was speaking with you guys and Eric, to speak a declaration of who you are without having gone through the real process of liberating yourself from a counter belief idea declaration of who you are that's just there out of habit, is actually going to entrench that idea. I'm beautiful. No, you're ugly. I'm beautiful. No, you're ugly. I'm beautiful. No, you're actually really fucking ugly. Why don't you go sit down? Like, it's actually entrenching the counter thought. And it's that at the core of this It's this work really, the real power in this work is not the tools, not the outcome of creating the declaration. It's actually everything I'm going to teach you. It's like, I'm going to teach you how to paint a fence and wax a car. And by the end, you're going to be like, cool, I can wax cars and paint fences now. And then I'm going to come and I'm going to start throwing punches at you like Mr. Miyagi. And you're going to be like, oh my God, I can block punches and kicks, right? Because the work is not about creating the declaration, the waxed car, the painted fence. The work is about the cultivation of a capacity to have a conversation with yourself that realizes the truth of who you're being, that liberates you from that in a way that actually sets you free from believing that, so you really feel free, and that allows you to come in contact with a deeper truth, a truth that's born from love as to who you actually are, and to cultivate that, right? And so, yes, I'm going to help you wax cars and paint fences, but by the end, you're going to be you're able to take Cobra Kai out like no problem. You'll be like a martial artist, you know? And in this work of of knowing yourself, liberating yourself, and creating yourself from soul, from truth. So the first step is realize who you're being. How do you do that? In simple form, who do I say that I am habitually all the time without even realizing it? And what do I mean? Who do I say that I am? Maybe there's a statement. It's like, oh, well, let me think of one that I used to have. I wax and wane with this like self-development stuff. I get really into it for a while and then I stop. I think I mentioned that last week. That was a way that I described myself that I thought was just an innocent, accurate description of the past. It's just the facts, man. I'm just telling you the truth about what has been occurring. And those are the most surreptitious identity statements, the ones where it just feels like we're explaining the truth of the past. It's like, I see a tree out there, I wax and wane, you know, my name is John Morgan. That like, what's another one? I typically get tired in the afternoons. That's just kind of who I am. That's just that's just my life. That's who I am. So it's not necessarily an I am statement, but the way that you relate to it when you're doing this work is to see that the habit of speaking something about yourself is actually an identity statement. And the way you can feel the truth of that is to just put the words I am that before that habit of speaking, and notice how, yeah, that fits like a t-shirt I've worn for years. I am that. I tend to wax and wane with this stuff. Oh yeah. I mean, that is kind of what I'm saying. That's who I am. It's so familiar. That's who I am. And so it's not about what are the ways that I speak, I am this. It's like, it's not that rigid. What are the things that I say often about myself that either start with the words I am, or which when I put I am that in front of it, that kind of feels like it fits. Yeah, that's me. And you might want to look for the ones that are limiting. Or if you, I mean, and there's a lot of work here. You know, when we do this course, we ask you to do a massive inventory. I mean, I don't think I have mine with me right now. Oh, it's up on the shelf. I won't pull it out now, but over 500 statements that I found in every area of my life. I went like, okay, in my relationship, in my health and fitness, in my work, with money, what are all the things that I think, and take my time with it. I mean, Steve told me to take, I think it took a week or 2 weeks of just inventory. And in our program, the coaching version of the course, we call it Hell Week, because it kind of sucks to just be constantly looking at and dwelling at all this stuff. But you got to do it, you know, on the bookshelf behind Lindsay on our team's, on her bookshelf behind her on her Zoom, she has that quote, if the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And this is the cave. The deeper you go in this cave, the more stuff you collect, the bigger the inventory, the more you can stomach that, the more good stuff you've got to work with to liberate yourself from and to find the gold behind or within. Okay, so that's the short version of how to create an inventory of who you're being already. The next piece then is the liberation piece. Now, this is the juiciest part. Liberation and conception, I call it. They're kind of separate, but they go together. So I mentioned it last week, but now we're going to go into like how to actually do it. A lot of you have heard the talk about forgiveness. So there's lots of ways to liberate yourself from an idea, from a belief that you have, right? I wouldn't know if it's, I would say it's Steve's favorite, but it's certainly the one that he teaches in the process of the creation of a document. And it's the one that I have found most useful, specifically in the liberation from an idea and then the conception of or the access of a more true and loving idea of who I am. But just to step back for a second, I know there's people that come from all walks of personal development, spiritual development. For me, the work of Byron Katie, I mentioned Vipassana meditation, Michael Singer's work of letting go, you know, things like that, processes and tools trauma release therapy, processing tools that have me not just see that something's not true, but have me feel in my heart a very powerful kinesthetic experience of it not being true and a sense of relief. You know, that moment you've been in an argument with your partner or something, and then you both get the courage and the willingness to say, I'm sorry. And it's like, oh my God, that was heavy. I feel so much better. Why did we wait so long? And it's like, just so relieving. It's like that. There's a feeling that the heart can go through of liberation. And it's super important for conception of a declaration that's true for you. And this is the big missing piece, I think, in the work of taking an affirmation off the shelf and just speaking it. You're just pushing it against something that's still there. We need to get it out first. And so the process of forgiveness is essentially an opportunity to let go of an idea that you have considered true. Now, the word judgment is kind of a good word to represent an idea that you've held to be true for a long time that's not useful, right? So to call something a judgment is to say, I've decided that I am this, or that the world is this way. And that's not useful, because usually you could judge things as good, but we typically use the word to mean judge things as not good. Obviously it could mean either, it could be neutral judgment, but we typically relate to it that way. So I think it's a good word. It's a useful word to relate to these ideas. So, I am that I wax and wane with this stuff. So, I've judged myself as somebody who waxes and wanes with my commitment and consistency to personal development tools and practices. I've judged myself as that. And I think the importance of judgment, if using that word judgment, is also acknowledging that the act of believing that had a little bit of hate in it, self-hate in it. And that's a big word. There was a book my friend recommended to me for years about self-hate. I'm like, I'm not reading that, dude. I don't hate myself. And he was like, read it, man. And I was like, I don't hate myself. And then I read it and I was like, holy shit, I hate myself. Wow. And an unwillingness to accept that there is a way of being within us that is way more violent than our ideal and way more aggressive than our ideal is like an unwillingness to tolerate the truth of who we be with ourselves. And so to acknowledge the possibility that you judge yourself harshly is entering the cave, is going into the darkness, not just looking at it from the outside, being like, yeah, I'm just doing some work on myself from out here. No, I'm going in. I judge myself, man. I judge myself hard. So I'm going in and I'm acknowledging that I judge myself as small. There's another big one. That was a big one. I talk about that all throughout the course. This distinction of my dad is 6'6", his same name, John. I'm a John Jr. Up until I was 20 years old in our family, he was Big John and I was Little John. Talk about a complex, right? Because I'm 5'8". And so that has had such a formative part of my life. And seeing where I'm small or I'm little was, wow, I judged myself as that. People said it and I took it on and I made it mean all sorts of things. Yeah, I judged myself that way. And so acknowledging that it's a judgment sets me up for the process of forgiveness. Because if I've judged myself, then forgiving myself is the undoing of that judgment, to be forgiven of a judgment. Okay. And so the real simple tool is essentially a mantra, a sentence that you can speak. And for me, the function of this sentence is to hold my attention on the possibility that, number one, I have judged myself. And number two, I can let that judgment go and I can turn it around. And what I mean by that is these words, these structures, these sentences are tools that hold your attention on a possibility. I did the work of Byron Katie for a long time as an intellectual exercise. And it wasn't until I was actually with Steve at her event at Esalen for 4 days where I really got that this isn't a tool to use to get an outcome. This is a meditation. She said that the work is a meditation. And so being with it, the iteration of it, just like wax the car, paint the fence, it's about what occurs and what happens to me through being in the process. And so the statement that I'm going to give you in a second is a statement that you use as a tool to presence yourself with the possibility of liberation from a judgment, of forgiving from a judgment. So it's real simple. I am small. Oh, that's the judgment. I forgive myself for judging myself as I am small. And it's kind of a weird grammar. This is exactly the grammar that Steve gave me, like word for word. I have changed it up over time, but I also really honor the original because I think that its weird way of speaking has a function. I forgive myself for judging myself as. So I'm forgiving myself for the act of judging myself as, right? So it's really subtle, but I'm forgiving myself for the act of judging myself, not for being that thing, but the act of deciding that I am that thing. I forgive myself for judging myself as, and then the full statement, I am small. And the way that I be with that is to be with it over and over and over again. I forgive myself for judging myself as I am small. And every time I be with it, each time I move through it, again, it's like a meditation. It's like in breath, out breath, in breath, out breath. And each breath in and out gives me more capacity to focus my attention, to go into mindfulness, to drop out of my thinking. Each time through this statement, I get closer and closer to the felt possibility that I can let go of this idea because I didn't need to believe it in the first place. And sometimes it's still hard to forgive myself for doing that, because sometimes what we do is we judge ourselves for having judged ourselves for so long as something that wasn't useful. And this is a very slippery thing in self-development. The second you become aware that you judged yourself as something that wasn't useful for so long, you weaponize your self-awareness and you judge yourself for having done that. Oh my God, I can't believe that I saw myself as small for all these years. How much time I have wasted. You'd think I would have noticed this sooner. I've been around this stuff for almost 2 decades now. Or I thought I did this work already. Why am I still judging myself? I'm going to judge myself right now for judging myself all this time. I call it meta judgment. Super subtle, but it's a trap. And so I want to give you a tool that can help you to loosen the grip on yourself, to really to lubricate this process of forgiveness, to make it even easier. And I saw this originally through reflecting on seeing how my younger self was the one that started believing that, and he didn't know it was happening. And I realized, wow, I wasn't aware. And I don't really know like how it should or shouldn't work in the court of law. But I have never really philosophically wrapped my head around somebody being found guilty of something that they didn't realize was wrong that they did. Like if I break some ordinance in the city and I didn't know the ordinance, I just moved here and I break the ordinance. It's like, actually, I'll tell you a funny story. Darren on my team lives in Trinidad and Tobago. And he's like, if people just take a pee on a tree, like it's just normal where I live. And then I moved to Florida and was going to school there, and I took a pee tree, and the cop came out of the bushes and said, "You disgusting animal," and she arrested me. I mean, like, he didn't realize what he was doing. So yes, you have to go along with the ordinance of the country, but like, was he really wrong in that? For me, the wrongness, the moment I see that I wasn't aware, I'm suddenly free. It's like, geez, of course I could forgive myself. I didn't even realize I was doing it. I was 8 years old. And so it's the moment of seeing that I wasn't aware that I become capable of forgiving myself. And so, and sometimes somebody might say, well, I was aware that I was doing that. So then what? Well, then here's the trick. Here's a trick. But were you aware that you were aware? Oh, actually, no, I wasn't. If you were aware that you were aware, would you have done that? No, I definitely wouldn't have. Now, so we're in the same place, right? So let's look back to the first time you started believing this, and let's see, was I aware that I was doing that I was taking that on, that I was judging? I was like, I am that. Did I know that? No, I didn't. I forgive myself for judging myself as I am small. Huh. Yeah. Oh my God, I didn't need to believe that. I can let that go. And then your heart goes, boom. Can anybody feel that possibility right now? Just like imagining it. Yeah. It's awesome. It's awesome. And in that moment, without skipping a beat, because guess what? Guess what that moment has to it naturally? A half-life. It's like, I'm free. right, is a window. Right? Wouldn't it be great if you do the work and then you're free forever? You just, all the neurons just is gone. No, we've opened a window. We've opened a window. The heart is free. It's a moment of innocence, of purity, of clarity. And in that moment, the sentence continues. For the new truth is, or I would even go, that's Steve's language. I don't know if he still uses it that way. I'd like dropping the word true, new, because for me, it's been there all along. For the truth is what comes. And so this is a moment of prayer. So pray is to ask and listen. And whatever your religion, use language that works for you. But for me, when I say ask and listen, I'm listening to the voice that comes through me, the voice of something greater than me. You could call it the intuitive voice, the voice of spirit, the voice of God, the voice of knowing, the voice of everything, the all, the universe. There is a voice that speaks within me that comes from an open, loving heart. It arises from the chest. It arises from the heart. And it has a wisdom and a profundity to it that is far greater than anything that I can figure out up here, especially when I'm feeling afraid or anxious. And so in that moment of liberation, before it starts to close, I mean, it could be minutes, but while it's open, I'm asking and I'm listening for the truth is. That's a sentence stem. It's also a question, right? I'm inviting, as a kind of a small point, I prefer sentence stems than questions to get to answers, because the mind is almost more willing to finish a sentence than it is to answer a question. It's just a different way of phrasing it. Instead of saying to myself, well, what's the truth? Voice within, I just, for the truth is, and then shut up with my mouth and listen deeply. For the truth is, I am, help it along a little bit, give it the I am, because you might be, for the truth is, the beds need to be made. Oh, no. We're stay focused. For the truth is, I am champion. The truth is, I am a giant. Truth is, I am the greatest. Whatever, there's going to be something that comes that's beautiful, that has an innocent grandiosity to it. Right? It's not ego, but it's going to be big. And that's okay. Don't make it small. Watch for how your mind tries to get involved and be like, all right, God, let's not get crazy here. People might hear you declare this. Let's not make it too big. No, just let it speak. Our childlike innocence is grandiose. Let it speak. And as soon as those words come, just write them down. Don't start editing. Don't start asking, is it right? Is it wrong? You got 500 of these to do at least. And remember, it's not even about the outcome as much as it is about learning to be in relationship with the self and with dialogue this way. For the truth is, I am champion. Okay, let's write that down. I am champion. Cool. So that is the essence of the process. That's the 15, 20-minute version of what in our course is probably 4 or 5 hours. But those are all the most important points. Those are the key points. But then what? Now, we touched on this a little bit last week, right? Like about the importance of being with your document now that you have. So how do you get from a declaration to a document? You just do that over and over again. Do it for all of them, right? And then if you have 500 limiting judgments about yourself and you go through this for every single one, you're going to have 500 empowering ideas. There's going to be some of them that are the same. You're going to go from I am little and I am small and I am not enough. And you're going to get I am champion, I'm champion, I'm champion. Okay, cool. So those are obvious. It's like, it's the same one. It's okay if the same one comes. You're also going to have lots of different ones. I probably had, I don't know, a couple hundred empowering statements and declarations after. So the next process is a process of distillation, of distilling these ideas into a subset of ideas, a small number of ideas that hold the power of all of them or most of them. Now, this is a place where the caveat I get at the beginning can often be very useful, because it's, if you start believing that the truth is in the words instead of within you as expressed by the words, then you're going to get hung up on distilling, because you're going to think, oh God, what if I drop this one and it's the true one and I get the wrong words and I don't pull it to, relax. First of all, Just because you distill doesn't mean you can't bring something back later. So the way that I do it on a practical level, I keep all the original and then I distill and I keep that and I keep that, I keep that. So I have it all. It's not going anywhere. It's all documented. You know, for each one of my declarations, I could probably go back through the tree and find 50 of them. So it's all there. It's not going anywhere, but I do want to be with it so I could bring it down, bring it down, bring it down. So don't worry about making the wrong decision. Don't worry about losing this word or that word. So the beginning is to not be worried, to be able to be free with it. Don't worry about getting it wrong because it's not a right way to do it. Again, the words are just tools. You are the master. They are tools for you. And so you get to decide what's right and what isn't. And you can always change your mind. Just remember that. And it will serve you to distill this list to, I would say, 8 to 15 statements. I'm just throwing that number out intuitively from my own experience. When it's somewhere in that range, that's a number of statements that I can hold in my mind, that I can remember and speak, and they can hold they're like, I call it the short version. Actually, when I journal, most of the time I journal the short version, but each statement has would probably be 4 or 5 statements. If I want to take my time with it, I can speak the short version or speak the longer version, but I have a distilled enough version that I can hold in my mind. I could be waiting in line somewhere and I don't happen to have my phone in my hand, which is great. And what am I going to do? I'll just speak through my declarations, whisper it to myself or speak it a little bit or do it in my head. And so that's one of the most important reasons to really distill this down into a small piece, a small thing that you can hold. Because of course, distilling increases the power, but it also makes it available to you for regular use. And that regular use is more important than making sure you've got every single word in there. So we go all into way more detail about the practicalities around how to distill, like grammatically, what some things you can do that make it easier to make it work better. But the essence of it is that. Okay. And then now that you've got a distilled system, we actually have a really cool module that Lindsay on our team loves, where literally in 15 minutes, I will have you memorize all 15 statements. If you've got 15 of them like that, using a mnemonic. And then once you've been able, I've done this with clients numerous times. We go through the process and then they instantly have the entire document memorized. Like anybody could learn your entire document in 15 minutes and have it completely memorized. It's a really fun tool. I actually learned it from Darren Brown, the psychological illusionist in the UK, but that's an aside. So that's one of the small modules that's in there. And then the next and most important piece, after you have your document and it's distilled, then what? Well, how do you bring it to life? We talked about the importance of that last week with Eric, but I want to share with you the key concept that at the heart of what has this, actually the key concepts at the heart of what has a document actually turn into real being. And the two pieces of it are activation and cultivation. So activation of being is where I turn it on. I turn on a way of being. Now, it's not just your emotional state, right? That's part of it. Your state of being is partly your emotional state. It's feeling empowered, feeling good, feeling alive, feeling energized, like you might from doing some exercise or having a great experience. That's part of it. But another part of it is the way that feeling is expressed through meaning and story and ideas that live inside these words. Because you can feel on top of the world as the ultimate coach, the best coach in the world. You could feel on top of the world as the ultimate father. And that same feeling is going to express as two different things. Remember, being isn't just about how you feel. It's also about how you're showing up and acting and expressing and behaving in the world. And so you want to activate not just the feeling, but the ideas. You want to be present with the possibility that I'm a published author through this good feeling. And then that published author goes out in the world feeling on top of the world, and they meet somebody and somebody says, what do you do? And they say, I'm an author. And they say, what are your books about? Well, the next one is about this. And it's like, that's so interesting. I have a friend who's a publisher. I got to introduce you. Right? The opportunities are created by expressing the good feeling through the idea. So when you're activating being, you're activating both a feeling and a possibility in the world of form. So you're being those things that are in your document, you're being them. So it is the activation of a way of being iteratively, consistently over time that cultivates an unconscious and automatic habit of being that way without activation. without intentional activation. And using some more normal language, if I practice creating who I am and being it on a daily basis, over time, I'm going to end up showing up that way without even meaning to. You know, if every morning I see myself as a certain way of, in a certain way of being, and I feel it and it's true for me, that's going to have a half-life. All activated being has a half-life because there's other influences. And if I do it regularly, some mornings I'm just going to wake up being the author, being the published author without even having to go through my document first. I still will, because I can sharpen the sword, but it starts to get easier. It starts to become more familiar. It starts to become more automatic. It's more available. And it's a great feeling. One of my favorite things to happen through the activation and cultivation of being, and I make this promise to everybody who does our course, this will happen. When you activate and cultivate being regularly, somebody in the world will experience you in such a way where they will speak your declaration to you verbatim, having no clue that you've ever spoken that to yourself or that it exists as an idea in a document somewhere. Always happens. That is magic, because then you really, that's the moment that you really get, holy shit, it's that simple. I take an idea, I speak it, I speak it, I speak it, I see it, I feel it, I be it, I express it in the world. People feel it, experience it, they come into contact with what it means for them, and they find the words and they speak into me and they're exactly the same verbatim. Wow, that's magic. On my door says, abracadabra, I create as I speak. That's magic. Okay. So I already gave you one of the most important pieces, but I did it quickly. Let me go back to it. The cultivation, sorry, the activation of being, which is part of the cultivation of being, occurs not when you say the words, and not only when you see the words, that's better, but when you actually feel it. So you have to feel it. You know, I've heard from the Joe Dispenza universe that, like, it is when we have an emotional release of the neurochemicals that produce the feeling of emotion. Those neurochemicals make possible new neural synaptic connections in our brain, probably in our heart, in the neurons of our heart, in our gut, everywhere, right? It's only when those chemicals are released that protein synthesis can occur and new neurons can be made, right? We can fire neurons without a feeling, but if we have the feeling, we can also create new neurons. So when we're feeling it, we're creating new maps and patterns in our mind about who we are. And so if you want to actually not just activate it, like get the electricity running through that possibility, but you want more neurons dedicated to that, you need to feel it as well. That's going to really encourage the cultivation of this as a habit. And so if you want to feel it, then you need to see it. And if you want to see it, then you need to speak it into something. So I am champion is a concept born in the moment of conception when I spoke the statement for the new truth is, right? It's a concept. It's hard to see a concept unless we're applying it to a context. So when I want to see something that I'm speaking, I speak it into a context in my mind. I'll think of a place, I'll think of a person, I'll think of a situation, I'll think of an object. I'll think of coming to do a talk for you guys, and I'll speak the words, I am champion. And then suddenly I see me facing a Zoom screen with all these beautiful faces, and I can start to see what it looks like to be champion, right? I can look at Dave's face and his smiles and his thumbs up, and I can see Joe and all his like nodding and thumbs up, and Jeff taking notes with his pen, and I can start to create ideas about what it is to serve them and to be for them and to care more about what they get in their life through this than anything else. And then what happens when I'm seeing that? What happens? I can feel it. And the moment I'm feeling it, there's the release of chemicals, there's the possibility of new synaptic connections, along with the idea that I am champion. That's seen, right? And suddenly that becomes more real for me. And it becomes something that will more likely to show up tomorrow, because there's more of my body dedicated towards that idea than the old one. Okay. And so we speak a concept into a context that gives us the ability to see it And once we can see it, we can feel it. And once we're feeling it, it's got more longevity to it. It's cultivating that as a habit. So, I mean, it's hard for me to summarize this, but I've got to stop. Again, we go hours and hours into that in the course, all the different ways that you can speak, see, feel. I call it contemplating causality, all these different concepts. Just what I'm really passionate about is when something's working, I'm like, slow down, back up. What did I just do? What just happened inside? What was there? How was I doing that? How can I break that down? How can I teach that so that somebody else can do inside their mind and body what just occurred for me? So I like to just walk you through the course really quickly with a screen share. And then I would like to have Joan Claire and Jeff, if you guys are still game, just share a few words as to your experience of this course. And like I said, when I messaged you guys, only the truth, nothing but the truth, just the facts, right? Don't need to big anything up. Not that you would anyway. But, I think what would be useful for people, look, you've got the main ideas now, right? So if you're going to invest in a course to really go deep into this, what would be useful is to know, like, what's the difference between already having the main ideas and then going into all this stuff? Like, why would that be useful for me if it even would? That's what would be great to hear from Jeff and Joan Claire about, because you've experienced that. But first, let me share my screen. Let's see here. Cool. All right. I hope you guys can see that. Eric, can you see that? Let me give me a thumbs up if you can see it.
Yeah,
right,
we can
sweet.
see it.
Awesome. Okay. So the Being Movement's Creating Being course. So there's some intro on the creating perspective and how to get the most out of the course. We talked about that at the beginning, the creating perspective, the idea that your actions come from your results come from your actions from your way of seeing and being. And then we've got it's laid out in 8 weeks. Could you do it over greater time? Yes. I would say no faster than 8 weeks. But this is how it's laid out. So that first module, these are all, by the way, I'll click into this. These are all, they show as videos, but they're really audios. This is a 40-minute breakdown of, how to inventory your non-useful judgments, all the different tools and exercises. And so when I go through this, it's kind of like I'm coaching you. I teach you a concept, I give you this particulars, and then I give you an exercise and I say, now pause and go and do this, and then come back and press play and we'll continue on. So I'm walking you through the entire thing. We talk about creating a vision. So as much as whilst the basis is I am declarations, is also I have declarations too. That's about like what's relating to your goal is something that you already have. You can cultivate a state of having in the same way that you can cultivate a state of being. And I think I answered a question last week that was about this. It's the relationship between being and having that creates the action that produces particular outcomes in the world, right? So, this is an important one, how to create a consistent morning routine. So like I talked about, I am that I wax and wane with this stuff was the old idea. And it was a realization that creating who I am in relationship to the work of creating who I am was the most important work. I'll say that again. Creating who I am in relationship to the work of creating who I am is the most important work. And so that's why this is right up front. And in the first week is like, let's create you as somebody who does this work consistently, powerfully, and deeply. I give an example of the self-cultivation work that I do. We have these action reports that you can do every week to hold yourself to account if you would like, where you just submit the work that you did. And then in week 2, we go through the liberation conception. Liberation is the forgiveness process that I talked about. It's about an hour here. I think this also includes some demonstrations. Yeah, with some demonstrations with clients. So I actually walking them through the process so you can see what it's like for a person to experience it, not just me talking about it. And then the conception piece is that moment, that sentence down that I talked about for the truth is, I go into how to distinguish whether or not it's just your thinking that's saying it or something deeper, that spirit from within you, how to, what you can do if you're not hearing anything, all those kinds of little challenges that might come up. And then once you capture all that, you move on to week 3. And in week 3, I have a little module here just to reconnect you at this point after you've done all this work. Like, how is this going to help me get stuff in my life and change things again? And it's just going a little bit deeper into the concept that your results come from who you're being. I remember I talked about the highest point of leverage, but it's revisiting it here and going deeper. And that's going to do 2 things. It's going to give you a deeper understanding of the impact of this work. And it's going to re-encourage you and re-motivate you after you've done this kind of heavy lifting to keep going. Because this is heavy work. It's hard work. And I think Jeff and Joan Claire will attest to that. And so that's really going to encourage you to keep going. And then this is, again, that module I talked about, distillation, about how do you bring all these different statements together to create a really powerful distilled version of these. And then abracadabra part 4 is speaking being. All the stuff I talked about, speak, see, feel, speaking a concept into a context so that you can bring life to it, so you can feel it, so it really becomes active and it starts to cultivate that as a habitual way of being. So those first 3 weeks really get you the process of creating a document. And by the end of the 3rd week, you're going to have a document that is freaking powerful and is resonant with the truth of who you are. And then in week 4, we start going into all the different practices that you can use to breathe life into it. Did I say that back here? Abracadabra speak week 3 already. So in week 4, oh yeah, we just go deeper. I mean, it is more of the same stuff, like different angles on it, how to take it even deeper, how to make it more active, how to have more fun with it, how to become even more consistent in your self-creating practice. Because now it's not just a matter of, having a good, strong habit of self-creation, but it's also now you're going to face the other obstacles, like the ones we talked about last week with Eric, like some of the judgments we might have, how now speaking them, that doesn't feel true for me. Good. That's the point, right? This is about learning to not get the cars waxed, but it's about learning how to block punches and kicks, so to speak, as a metaphor. There's that little module I mentioned about memorizing your declarations. You're going to love that one. And then now that we've got that established, then we take the use of creating your being and start to apply it to, like, in our life more proactively. So how do I create with conflict? When a conflict comes up in my life, how do I use my document and the way of being that I've come into contact with at the truth of who I am, and how to apply that in the conflict to actually liberate myself from that external conflict, whether it's with a business partner or in a relationship situation, such that not only can that go better, but it can go better through the cultivation and activation of my being. And the reason that's important is because not just it's a great way of creating an outcome, but it teaches you, again, how your being can be the source of your outcomes in your life. And this is the real important point, it will deepen your being. That's what I call an outdoing. That's also an indoing, an action I take in the world that creates who I am. Everything I say to everybody out there is also for me. Because guess what? Everything that comes out of my mouth goes in my ears. Right. And so that's true both literally and in all ways. When I'm expressing myself in the world, I'm teaching myself who I am. So this is about being a champion, is about, like, when I use the word champion, I talked about grandiosity earlier, the innocence of our grandiosity. There's a possibility that you have a uniqueness that is great, that has greatness within you. You could say being greatness, right? And so it's taking all of your document and declarations and allowing yourself to breathe the fullness into them. And then paradoxically, at the same time, seeing how not only you at your most expressed version is not only maybe the best in the world, because there's only one of you, but also through being the best in the world at that, that's actually how you're in high service to everybody. So I'm a champion, both in that I am the best at my particular way of being, and through being that, that's for you. So my being a champion is in both meanings of those words. Preparing your being, how to use the cultivation and activation of your being right before a meeting, right before you go meet with your partner, right before a date night. I've done that plenty of times. Right at the end of the day, before I go back to be with my wife and kids, right before a sales call. So just some context and some ideas about how to do it that way. Then we go into having it all, which is now I start going deeper into the idea of cultivating what you have, not just who you are. It just struck me like a ton of bricks one day when I realized that having is a state of being. And when I'm being that I'm having, I'm behaving that I have that thing, behaving that I have that thing, and it leads to me having that thing. That's the short version. This is the hour-long version. Being infinite value, seeing that your way of being, kind of like I talked about before, and its uniqueness, once expressed in the world, has infinite value. So especially if it's in the context of business, that's really, really useful. Being through doing, figuring out what actions you can take every day that express your being, maybe in the direction of a particular goal, or at least an expression of that being, for 2 reasons. One, those actions will help you to create results that you want. Second, for me, more important, taking those actions teaches me who I am. There's a lot of reasons to take action. For me, the best reason to take an action is because by taking it, I teach myself who I am. That's what that module is about. And then in week 7, we talk about creating what is. I've talked about creating who you are. I've talked about creating what you have. But I am is I and the verb to be. Am is the verb to be in the tense of personal or of an individual of self. But the verb to be is at the center. That's being, right? And so is also the cultivation of being. And so we show up and express ourselves in the world, not only as an expression of who we are, but also of what is. One of the ways that I show how this works so clearly is if in the context of money, if you were to allow your brain to finish this sentence, rich people are what comes. Some people might say kind, loving, generous. Others might say not so nice things. Guess what? What you believe rich people are is part of how you be in the world. So you don't just be who you believe you are, you also be what you believe is. And so I help you to go through the entire abracadabra process of realizing who you're being, or realizing what is in your world, liberating yourself from what is in your world, and conceiving a deeper truth of what is for you and your new world. So it's basically revisiting the process through the creation of what is. And the creation of self-other is the realization that, geez, other people out there, they're an idea that I hold inside me too. So what would it be like if I created my wife differently, my kids differently? Because I am being who they are in my mind. And so it's teaching you this process again through that context. And then just a really fun using apps and technology, how I do different things with voices and bringing things together, different tools that to make it fun. I mean, I talked about this last week. I make it fun. So I share some of the fun ways that I use tech to create my being. That's the course. Joan Claire, are you here? Can you come off mute if you are?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, thanks so much.
Hi.
Hi. So thank you for doing this. Will you just share for a few minutes what your experience has been in this course, kind of above and beyond what I just did today?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, JP. And I
Thank
love
you.
today how you've described how it's really our relationship with this whole process. It's the most important. That's a new insight for me. I think that I'm trying to breathe into more, as it's not so much like, I asked you, is what's the right way? It's just more of like my relationship with this whole process is fun and creative and playful too, right? So I love that.
Yes.
And to be totally transparent, I have not finished JP's Creating Being course. I'm doing it as part of his Being a Client Magnet self-study course. And there's so much, not only, information, what he teaches, but just like real life examples that he gives. And even the first 3 or 4 weeks that I will say daily in the morning, like revisiting my notes about it because it's so powerful. And what I love in particular about JP's kind of, at least in the beginning part of that course, is the importance of your vision. Because I feel like, the I am statements are so powerful, but I love how even in the last call you said, like, if we know where we're going and who we are, we have everything we need. And so I feel like that part of it was really beautiful for me because, well, everyone on this call can see, JP has a brilliant mind and a beautiful heart, and he practices what he teaches, which to me is really important. Like as a coach, it's most important who we're being with our clients. And so because JP is teaching that and I see him living it, and then he also has created this vision in Hawaii, which I really relate to on a heart level. I particularly love that vision part of it because it helps me keep alive that piece in this work as well. But I guess as far as the course itself, as JP said, just going through all those judgments, I didn't do 500, but this continual process, like he just goes so deep with helping you different prompts to help you see your default being. And, I'm daily still discovering new aspects of my default unuseful being. And JP gives you a lot of tools right at the outset in the first week or two to really go deep. And that's not the most comfortable, fun experience in a lot of ways. And yet I felt like it was so very impactful in a way that I hadn't experienced. I think, other coaches do this a different approach, but this is such a comprehensive, like one by one, going through those judgments. And I found that very useful with each individual judgment. And then as I'm going into it more, just the how you bring to life, like these declarations in context, I think is so important. That's something that you add a lot of tools with, like how can we bring these to life, right? It's not just to say it, to speak it is powerful in and of itself, but really emphasis on what are these declarations? How are you bringing them to life in context in your mind and your heart? And that's a really beautiful component. And then, yeah, it's just how to entangle them more in your brain. And I love the metaphor you use of like redwood tree roots and how they, you know, there's these such tall trees. I guess truth comes from the word tree or something, but like how to entangle them into your being, I think is, yeah. So,
well, yeah, let me just, so people aren't like, what the hell is she talking about? Like the
Yeah.
tree, redwoods can't hold themselves up. They only
Right.
are able to stand because their roots entangle with each other. And I think of each declaration as a redwood tree. And as we teach you how to entangle the declarations so that they all hold each other up. The entire document becomes like a forest. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what so I just love the depth of and breadth of what you teach, and I see that you live it, and that's really inspiring. So I think it's important to learn from someone you're inspired by. And to me, if you're inspired at all by JP's being and his brilliance and his beautiful heart and creating, being, and doing through love, then I can't think of a better course to get you on your way with that process.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you, Joan Claire. Thanks for being honest. Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jeff Munn, I love to hear from you. So for some context, Jeff is what I call a home run client. We got to work with him one-to-one. I think I probably said that to Darren before you even started working with us. I was like, oh man, Jeff's a home run, because like who you are and how you show up and how you just grab stuff by the horns. And so Jeff has done this course, but he also did it with our coaching. So just giving that as a caveat. So Jeff, what would you love to share?
I mean, there is so much to this course. I mean, you barely, I know you talked for an hour about it, but you barely scratched the surface. And there were some things that I was thinking about, like things to point out, things that made a difference for me that I wanted to share. And I really wanted to emphasize, you know, I think there is a temptation to think there's something magical about the document and that you need to have the right document. And if only I can have the right document, then I'll be the right person. And the document's only a pointer, right? The document's evidence. The document's evidence of who you already are and then who you are attempting to become. And for me, the feeling that I would get as I was saying my document, or as I was writing something down, or as I was in conversation with someone, there was so much valuable information in that. And I would notice how often I didn't need to necessarily add anything to my being. What I needed to do was release the stuff that was already getting in my way. And so for me, that process of documenting and creating and uncreating, it was more about, and I can't remember if you said this or I saw it somewhere else, it was more like a demolition project than a construction project, right? If I can only, like, who am I if I just stop getting in my way? And if I just really said what was on my heart and what was on my mind without editing it, without, you know, being who I could be in service to whoever I was being in service for. And that was the thing that I think made the biggest difference to me in the whole endeavor. I mean, yes, I have a document. I will go back to it from time to time still. But I'm always focused on the feeling. And for those of you who haven't heard of a guy named Neville Goddard from the mid-20th century, he wrote a book, Feeling is the Secret. It's amazing. It's like kind of stepping into the feeling of what you've already accomplished as this kind of magnetic way of getting it. And it's really consistent with all of your ideas around creating, because the document to me is really about creating. It's about the fact that we're always creating. All we're ever living in is this created model of the world that we're mostly unconsciously creating. And it's trying to make that more conscious and seeing, you know, what am I actually creating and is it serving me? And I think, you know, one other thing that I would add is the whole innocence piece that you talked about. There's a combination of this innocence. You know, I had this judgment and I was innocent, but also at one point, that judgment, that rule that I had for myself was useful. And just because it's no longer useful doesn't mean it never was. I had a lot of rules for myself when I was growing up about not speaking my mind, about not expressing who I truly was, about not saying, which girl I liked or what I was interested in, that protected me. I don't need them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But to think that somehow I was in error for having them in the first place didn't really serve me all that well, because I was exactly right feeling that way.
Yeah.
It's only now it's like, oh, okay, wait, I'm a 58-year-old man. I can actually make my own decisions on some of this stuff instead of like delegating it to my 7-year-old self.
Yeah.
And that's huge. So last thing, we're not only creating ourselves, you just barely touched on us, we're creating the world. How are we doing that? And you get into that in the course at the end. And that was really powerful for me too. Like how am I creating the people on this call? How am I creating the person in front of me? How am I creating my expectations about money in the world and whatever? It's all there in the course. It's all incredibly powerful. So
thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you. I love that what you articulated. Like the first thing I feel like you articulated, that the biggest benefit was the way of being that you learned to be in relationship with yourself. Like that's kind of what I was saying, right? Like that's such a huge win for me. And I would say it's a self-love. It's a capacity to liberate yourself and to speak truth, whether that's liberating yourself from a limiting belief and speaking the truth of who you are for yourself, to document a declaration, or in a moment with somebody else, being able to speak the truth in a conversation. Yeah. And to create a possibility there. It's that same skill. It's like wax the car, then, whoosh, then you're blocking things out there. It's, so wonderful. Thank you so much. That's it. I would love you guys to do the course. I'd love you all to do the course, to dive deep into it. If it speaks to you, click the link. I think somebody would have dropped it in the chat, and enjoy. If you have questions, just reach out to anybody.
Let me just
go for it, man.
For just a moment.
Please do.
Walk everybody through how they can register. So
can you spotlight yourself too?
Yeah, let me do that. And thank you, JP, so much for your brilliant training. And we're so fortunate to have you as a teacher and leader, philosopher, as a part of the Being movement. I'm really grateful for you. So the website to order the course, let me just put it in the Zoom chat and then let me speak it. So the website is beingmovement.com. And then when you go there, you're going to see events and then course. So you click on the course button. It doesn't say courses because we have one course, which is JP's course. So you click on course. And then when you click on that, it's going to take you to the next page here. It's just kind of slow because we're on Zoom right now. And then there's another button. There you go. So this is the course here. And you just click purchase and it'll take you to a checkout page. The investment is $997 US, and you can pay with any major credit card or Apple Pay. And so you just go to beingmovement.com. You click on course, you click on register, it'll take you to this checkout page. And then you complete your purchase and you'll get instant access to this course. And this is an opportunity for all of us to really, it's the closest thing to having JP coach you one-on-one, other than having coach you one-on-one, because he's right there. He's put all his ideas about this, his best ideas, in an organized way in this course, so you can go deeper around the document. And so we're so grateful, JP, that you created this course for the Being movement and for who you are in the world, and for all that you've learned from Steve, all that you've learned from all kinds of other folks, and pouring all this into this really beautiful way that you've organized the content. And I'll just turn it over to you if there's any final thoughts you want to share before we wrap up.
No, I would say just thank you guys very, very, very much. Obviously I love this work, and I think if you immerse yourself in it with me, you're going to come to love it too. So thank you for being here. I love you all.
Fantastic. Well, it's great for all of us to gather as a community. Thank you for being here. JP looks forward to helping those of you that would like his help. I'll look forward to the next time we connect as a community. You guys have a great weekend. We'll talk to you later.
Bye for
Bye.
now.